In late June 2022, Russian forces declared complete control over the city of Sievierodonetsk. On any tactical map, this appeared as a clear and significant victory, a step towards consolidating control over the Luhansk province. Yet, the reality on the ground posed a far more complex question. Why did it take nearly 2 months of relentless combat, at the cost of immense resources and manpower, to seize a city that had been reduced to a landscape of ruins? The battle for Sievierodonetsk was not just another engagement. It marked the point where the conflict in Donbas descended into its most brutal and punishing phase of attrition. It was a victory, but one that offered no strategic breakthrough. Following the withdrawal of forces from the vicinity of Kyiv in April 2022, the Russian military command recalibrated its strategic focus. The primary theater of operations shifted decisively to the Donbas region. The new objectives were clear and methodical: establish full control over the entirety of the Luhansk and Donetsk provinces, leverage overwhelming artillery superiority to systematically dismantle Ukrainian defensive positions, and avoid the kind of high-risk extended logistics operations that had proven so costly in the north. Within this revised strategic framework, the urban cluster of Sievierodonetsk and its sister city, Lysychansk, emerged as the last significant bastion of Ukrainian control in Luhansk. The strategic value of Sievierodonetsk was undeniable for both combatants. As the temporary administrative capital of the Luhansk province, its symbolic and political weight was substantial. Geographically, its position on the eastern bank of the Sievierodonetsk River, directly connected to the higher ground of Lysychansk on the western bank, formed a formidable dual-city defensive hub. For Russia, the capture of Sievierodonetsk was a critical step, a tangible move toward the stated goal of controlling the entire Luhansk region. Conversely, for Ukraine, holding the city meant forcing the Russian military into a protracted, resource-draining campaign. It was a test of endurance, where every day the Ukrainian flag flew over Sievierodonetsk translated into more time, more ammunition, and more lives expended by the attacking forces. Prove. The assault began in early May 2022, not with a rapid armored thrust, but with a deluge of fire. Russia unleashed a large-scale, systematic artillery barrage of unprecedented intensity. Air power, tactical missile systems, and massed long-range artillery were employed in a continuous, rolling bombardment that targeted the city's infrastructure with methodical precision. Unlike the initial phase of the conflict around Kyiv, there was no attempt at a swift, decisive maneuver. The strategy was one of erosion. Russian forces advanced slowly, using firepower to pulverize each city block, each defensive strongpoint, before infantry moved in to occupy the rubble. Sievierodonetsk was systematically transformed into a shattered, lunar landscape, a ruined battlefield where the advantages of urban defense were steadily ground away by the sheer weight of ordnance. As Russian ground units pushed into the ravaged city, they were met with fierce resistance. Ukrainian forces, primarily composed of infantry and mechanized brigades, expertly utilized the ruined urban terrain to their advantage. They mounted a tenacious defense, transforming every shattered building and debris-filled street into a fortress. Organized and localized counterattacks became a key feature of the fighting, with Ukrainian units managing to push back Russian advances and, at one point, regain control of nearly half the city. This unexpected resilience forced the Russian command to repeatedly redeploy forces and commit valuable reserves to the urban meat grinder. However, the core problem for the Ukrainian defenders remained insurmountable. They lacked the artillery firepower to effectively counter the Russian barrages, and their logistical lifelines were becoming increasingly precarious. The bridges connecting Sievierodonetsk to Lysychansk across the river were under constant, relentless fire, making the resupply of ammunition, food, and reinforcements a perilous undertaking. Losses on both sides were mounting at an alarming rate. It was a grinding battle of close-quarters combat that neither side could win quickly, and neither was willing to abandon. The decisive factor in the battle for Sievierodonetsk ultimately came down to the brutal calculus of logistics and geography. By securing the high ground surrounding the city, Russian artillery gained a dominant position. Their guns could fire with impunity deep into the urban areas and critically bring direct, observed fire onto the last remaining supply routes into the city. Vital bridges connecting Sievierodonetsk to the relative safety of Lysychansk became a kill zone. Constantly shelled and targeted by airstrikes, they were rendered impassable for any large-scale transport. The flow of supplies slowed to a trickle, and the evacuation of the wounded became a near-impossible task. At this juncture, the operational logic shifted. Holding Sievierodonetsk, at the cost of such heavy casualties and with no secure line of supply, no longer provided a commensurate strategic benefit. The risk of the city's remaining defenders being completely cut off and encircled became an imminent and unacceptable possibility. In late June 2022, the Ukrainian General Staff made a calculated, non-emotional decision. Orders were given for a phased withdrawal of all remaining units from Sievierodonetsk. This was not a panicked rout or a collapse of the defensive line in the face of overwhelming pressure. It was a deliberate act of force preservation, a tactical retreat designed to move seasoned, combat-effective troops to more defensible positions. The objective was to abandon the untenable rubble of Sievierodonetsk to prepare for the next phase of the defense. First in the heights of Lysychansk and then on deeper, pre-prepared lines further west. On June 25, 2022, after nearly 2 months of the most intense fighting seen in the conflict to date, the city of Sievierodonetsk fell. In a purely military assessment, the outcome was mixed. Russia had achieved its immediate objective, seizing a key urban center and bringing almost all of Luhansk province under its control. For Ukraine, it was the loss of a crucial administrative and defensive hub. But the price of this victory was staggering. The campaign's prolonged duration had consumed vast quantities of artillery ammunition and had exacted a heavy toll in both men and materiel from Russia's most capable units. Critically, the capture of Sievierodonetsk did not lead to a strategic breakthrough. The expected collapse of Ukrainian defenses did not materialize, and the Russian advance stalled, unable to immediately exploit the success and push deeper into Donetsk. The battle for Sievierodonetsk demonstrated a hard lesson of modern warfare, that a significant advantage in firepower can indeed seize territory, but it does not guarantee a swift or decisive victory, especially against a determined and well-organized defender. The battle for Sievierodonetsk did not capture the global imagination in the same way as the siege of Mariupol. It did not become a worldwide symbol of resistance. But in purely military terms, its significance was profound. It marked the definitive transition of the conflict into a war of attrition. The fighting in the ruins of the city set a new, grim precedent, where progress was measured in meters, not kilometers. And every square foot of captured ground was paid for with an exorbitant expenditure of time, ammunition, and human lives. After the fall of Sievierodonetsk, the operational tempo of the war slowed dramatically. Both sides, exhausted by the ferocity of the battle, dug in and prepared for a protracted struggle of endurance. From that point forward, the Donbas was no longer a theater for rapid campaigns and decisive maneuvers, but a relentless grinding war of who could withstand the punishment the longest.